biggest backbench rebellion of his premiership when MPs vote today on new COVID rules for England. More than 70 Conservatives have indicated that they will oppose the government, but Labour will back it. The most controversial is the proposed COVID pass for entering large venues to prove that someone is fully vaccinated or has a negative lateral flow test. Other measures include new rules on face masks in England, which came in last week, making them compulsory in most indoor settings except for pubs and restaurants, and allowing fully vaccinated people to avoid self-isolation if they're exposed to someone with COVID by taking daily lateral flow tests for 7 days with a negative result. There's also a vote on compulsory vaccination for frontline NHS staff in England. Our political correspondent Iain Watson reports.
Demand for vaccines has certainly been given a boost following dire warnings from the government about a tidal wave of COVID infections and predictions of a dramatic increase in the number of people likely to need a hospital bed. But ministers are still struggling to make the case to many of their own MPs that more restrictions are needed to slow the spread.
I've been speaking to a lot of my colleagues, and now seeing that the data and the fact that the new variant is doubling every 2 to 3 days, and I think it's starting to hit home just how serious a situation we could be in if we don't take forward the measures that we're making today. And they are proportionate and they're time limited.
Prime Minister could certainly do with a boost as the country faces its latest COVID crisis. Several polls have put Labour ahead, some for the first time since the election. And a move to introduce COVID passes in England, where proof of vaccination or of a negative test would be required to enter nightclubs and large venues, is seen by some of his own MPs as authoritarian, ineffective and, well, unconservative.
I was looking last night at some photographs coming from Italy where, in a restaurant, the police went into a restaurant and asked to inspect everybody's vaccination certificates. I don't think we live in a country where that sort of thing is acceptable, nor do we want to see it.
I haven't seen the evidence from places that have already got these vaccine passports that they actually work, and therefore the part of getting through this pandemic is taking the nation with you. And if they see something that doesn't look right, that doesn't look like it'll be effective, then you wonder why we're going down that particular road.
Boris Johnson is facing his biggest rebellion since the election. Many of his own MPs have genuine concerns about COVID passports, but some of the rebels also want to put down a marker. They're hoping a show of strength today will dissuade the Prime Minister from introducing further restrictions in the days and weeks to come as COVID cases continue to rise. The official UK government line is that there's no plan to go beyond Plan B, but the Scottish and Welsh governments are considering further restrictions. But even to get the current measures through Parliament, Boris Johnson will have to rely on a helping hand from Labour.
We've had briefings from the government's chief medical officer, chief scientist, and we understand that some restrictions, unfortunately, are necessary at this stage, just while we see what is happening with Omicron and we get more data of it coming through. So we have to vote for Plan B, and that's what we'll be doing today.
Have the support of the party, Minister.
The Health Secretary will take comfort from recent polling suggesting public support for COVID passports, but he'll still be facing catcalls from his own side in Parliament.
Iain is live for us in Westminster just now. Iain, this rebellion is about more than the COVID restrictions, isn't it?
Well, it's certainly focused on the COVID passports or passes, Rita, which incidentally the Liberal Democrats also oppose. But yes, the potential scale of that rebellion suggests that something more significant is taking place. In recent weeks, there's been an erosion of trust between Boris Johnson and many of his own backbench MPs. They're worried about how Downing Street is being run, not just allegations of parties and events at Number 10 during lockdown, but also, if you remember, that botched attempt to change the standard system in Parliament. And there is a fear now that the Conservatives' biggest electoral asset at the 2019 general election, Boris Johnson himself, is turning into a liability. So the result of this week's Shropshire by-election is certainly going to be closely watched. Now, what the government believe is, of course, they've got public opinion on their side when it comes to introducing new restrictions. But the difficulty is this: if these restrictions aren't quite enough to slow the spread of Omicron, They come back for more, and they increasingly need Labour support to get their measures through. And quite frankly, the mood on the Conservative side of Parliament could change from being restless to being mutinous.
Iain, many thanks. Iain Watson there. The UK's Health Security Agency is warning of a very difficult 4 weeks ahead as the Omicron variant shows a higher rate of infection. Dr.